Welcome to Rainier Avenue Radio. Earth deserves more than a day. This is day 2 of our 5-day summit where we're discussing environmental justice, climate justice, everything under that umbrella. Yesterday was an amazing day. Happy and excited to be here again today. We're going to get this morning started by talking about resilience hubs. This will be hosted by Nancy Huizar, and they'll be joined by Ben Jung, the Resilience Hubs Advisor for the Seattle Office of Sustainability and Environment. And I'm going to let them take the conversation away right now. Nancy Huizar.
Thank you, Tony. Good morning. I'm Nancy, like Tony said, and I'm really excited to be with you all today. We're going to talk about resilience hubs. If you don't know what they are, great. We're going to get into it. We're also going to give a little bit of history of environmental justice in the U.S. and locally and why this initiative is important. And then we'll talk about what resilience hubs are and then take questions at the end. So I'll dig into my intro a little bit. If you listened yesterday, you might have heard some of my story. So my name is Nancy. I grew up here in Beacon Hill. I went to Franklin High School when I was younger, and growing up, I was always around folks of color, like all of my classmates, folks of color. And I remember in high school, my teacher was like, it was my senior year. My language arts teacher was like, take a look around the room because you're never going to be in a place like this again where you're around so many folks of color. Growing up, elementary school, middle school, high school, I was like, that's crazy. Why would you say that? It just seems so untrue. And then going into college to the University of Washington, entering my program, Aquatic and Fisheries Science. And when I started out with my program, I was really into orca whales. That's how I started getting into the environmental movement, conservation work, and save the orcas. And then going into college and kind of experiencing the real world after graduating, I really saw the disconnect between environmental programs and how this supported folks that look like me. There was a lot of engagement that I saw for environmental programs that didn't reach folks that, again, look like me or my family, didn't reach elders or any of the youth that I was for. So I switched to doing community organizing instead of doing water quality work. So now I do consulting. I'll get into a little bit more about why consulting versus a nonprofit a little bit later. But me, have been introduced myself.
Thanks so much, Nancy. It's so nice to hear more about your story and how you got to this work. Hi everyone, my name is Ben Jung. I am, like Tony mentioned, the Resilience Hubs Advisor at the Office of Sustainability and Environment at the City of Seattle. I am not actually from Seattle. I'm from New York originally. I moved here about 5 years ago, but I've grown up my whole life in New York. My parents immigrated to New York from Korea in the 80s, and I grew up in a predominantly white suburb outside New York City. And so kind of had the opposite experience, I would say, to Nancy growing up. I grew up in a mostly white suburban neighborhood, didn't really have a lot of folks of color, but really grew up in an immigrant household whenever I was at home. And my family lived in Queens in New York City proper. And so we would always go back to Queens to visit my grandmother and my aunts and uncles. And from a really young age, I was really struck by how different the suburbs were to the city and how folks were kind of separated and segregated, either into white neighborhoods, black neighborhoods, Asian neighborhoods. And so that stuck with me as I was, moving on and going to school, in high school and in college. was always interested in the built environment, in how cities were created, and how people had access to certain things and other folks didn't. And so I think that with a combination of other life experiences brought me to this work of climate justice, of community organizing, of social justice. And as the Resilience Hub's advisor in the Office of Sustainability and Environment, I think we are really trying to be that bridge between government and community. That bridge isn't always there. It doesn't always feel like it's there. There's always room for improvement. And so hoping that this work that we're doing can be a bridge between government policies, programs, initiatives that exist to what community wants and needs in their spaces and in their neighborhoods. So I think with that, I might go and talk a little bit more about resilience hubs and what the city is doing, and then we'll go into more of the history. So the city currently is creating a citywide resilience hub plan. So what are resilience hubs? The city is using a definition that's being used by other cities and other organizations, which is that resilience hubs are trusted community serving facilities that serve residents in everyday life and before, during, and after an emergency. So here I want to call out a couple of key components, which is that the hubs themselves are trusted and community serving, so that they are, here in the community, folks know who they trust them, they're established, and they're deeply embedded in their neighborhoods. I'll also point out the second part, which is that they're facilities as well. So here we're talking about physical buildings. So although some places might be trusted, say like a community garden or a pea patch, we are looking at resilience hubs to be physical buildings where people can gather and people can be inside. And the second part of the definition is that they serve residents in everyday life and also before, during, or after an emergency. So when we talk about resilience hubs, sometimes folks will be inclined to think about emergency preparedness. They'll think about, what happens when there's catastrophes like earthquakes or tsunamis. And that's a key part of resilience hub. We want to make sure that people are ready for those catastrophic events. But we also know that in most everyday life, those things don't happen. So people experience kind of their normal life 99.9% of the time. So here we really want to stress that resilience hubs, although they do help during these catastrophic events and disruptions, they're also there to help residents during their everyday lives in the 99.9% of the time, where things are normal and people are just going about their daily routine. And I also want to call out that resilience hubs are critical pieces of infrastructure and strategy, and that the city is looking to really think about how resilience hubs can be part of the climate change adaptation strategy in frontline communities. And what we mean by that is that, climate change is here. We see it more and more every summer, every winter, and we know that climate change affects everybody, but some communities bear the burden more than others. And here we've seen, low-income communities, communities of color, Black and brown communities, feel the impacts of climate change disproportionately. So they're overburdened by events such as wildfire smoke or flooding because of the other racial, economic, and social factors that are at play. And then I think now I'm going to pass it back over to Nancy to talk a little bit more about the history.
Thanks, Ben. Yeah, so today we're in this week is environmental justice, right? Wanted to bring in some of the history that if you think about the environmental movement and environmental rose up and was fighting against it because they knew the impacts of these PCBs and how they would be impacted with diseases and all kinds of other negatively impactful things, and that what that's what gave rise to the environmental justice part of the movement. And again, like if you look at our history and thinking about the civil rights movement and the environmental movement, they really didn't have an opportunity to um, converge because of the racism that folks were dealing with and how to overcome that. And we're just now kind of seeing the shift to prioritize justice with this environmental work that's happening. Um, and we want to also highlight some local examples. Warren County, that happened in the 70s, and there's been a lot of work and movement in other parts of the US and bringing it locally. I'll pass it back to Ben to talk about South Park, and we'll talk about a couple of other neighborhoods too.
Yeah, thank you, Nancy. So in South Park, South Park is located along the shores of the Duwamish River, and it is one of the lowest lying, if not the lowest lying neighborhood in the city of Seattle. So it is definitely in the floodplain, in the 50 and the 100-year floodplain, and sees a lot of that kind of natural vulnerability, right? The South Park neighborhood floods during major storms. There was the King Tide event that happened, I think, in 2022, which led to massive flooding in the entire neighborhood. And South Park is predominantly low income and is predominantly Latino and, community of color. I think in that sense, you're seeing the environmental component of it being in a low-lying area adjacent to the river and the flood risk that provides. But I think it's also, and this going back to what Nancy was mentioning, in terms of the environmental justice component, there's also a lot of man-made things that are in the neighborhood that create these health outcomes and are part of the environmental justice issues that are in the neighborhood. For example, South Park is crisscrossed by I-5, 509. There's a bunch of arterials, 2 separate bridges that bring major trucks in and out of the neighborhood. There's also the waste transfer station that's located there. There's also heavy industrial uses that are right in the neighborhood next to the residential area. And these things aren't, they aren't natural. They weren't there. They were created by people and they were placed there. And it contributes to the environmental justice components of the neighborhood because you see that it's not only the natural environment of the flooding, of the sea level rise that the community faces, but it's also the effects of diesel trucks going in and out in terms of air pollution. It's also the effects of the waste transfer station, the I-5 corridors. So these are along with the racial and economic components of the neighborhood. And so here we're seeing, there's also not a supermarket, like a full supermarket in South Park, so we're talking about food access as well. So in that sense, this is one of, I would say that, South Park, for example, is a neighborhood of historic injustice, both climate, racial, economic, but there's also rich organizing that is happening and organizations that are coming together, communities coming together, to help with food access with Mara Farms, to help with community, gathering spaces, help youth and elders, a lot of rallying and organizing that has happened around celebrations and around the folks there for folks there to really foster this sense of community cohesion and resilience. So, something that we find is that, folks who are more connected to their neighbors, who know who their people are, who know the folks that they pass on the street when they go to the library, when they go to the store, there's, more resiliency there. There's more community resiliency, more than you would see in wealthier, whiter neighborhoods where folks, might have the resource that they need in their immediate, family or in their immediate building. And so I think South Park is a, prime example of how environmental justice affects a neighborhood, how low-income folks and folks of color are hit first and worst by climate change, but how there's been a rich organizing that has happened around the river, around the neighborhood, around the community that's there. And I know Nancy is really familiar with some of the work that's also happened in Beacon Hill and Rainier Beach. So I'll hand it back to you.
Yeah, so with Beacon Hill specifically, I'm going to go into some history about an organization and kind of what they're doing now. So in Beacon Hill, in 2000, like that's it, just 2000, 24 years ago, there was a medical incinerator at the VA hospital, and it was impacting the air quality around the neighborhood. And so an organization called the Community Coalition for Environmental Justice, CCEJ, worked to get that incinerator shut down. And if you listened to our session yesterday, I mentioned my mom. She immigrated here from the Philippines, and she didn't have asthma when she came here, but she moved to Beacon Hill when she was 25, and then she slowly developed asthma, and my brother also had asthma. And in thinking about, the impacts of that incinerator, we were born in 1991, 1992. And so the incinerator was still around, thinking about the air quality from the highways of I-5 and I-90, and thinking about the airplanes overhead as well. There's been a lot of work in the neighborhood to continue working on air quality as we get a lot of noise pollution from the airplanes, as well as air pollution from the highways and the airways going by. And to go back to what Ben was saying, a lot of the organizing happening in Beacon Hill was led by a local organization called Got Green. I worked for them. That's where I did a lot of community organizing a few years ago. And Got Green and their sister organization, Puget Sound Sage, created a report called Our People, Our Planet, Our Power, where they talked about the importance of community connection to combat environmental injustice and to build community power so that folks can advocate for a healthy environment. And in that report, they talk about Hurricane Katrina. And when Hurricane Katrina happened, a lot of devastation, and folks couldn't really rely on the government to come and provide aid in the time that folks needed it. And so that's really where a lot of folks start to realize, your neighbor is your first responder. That's going to be who you want to connect with and chat about getting resources. And so after learning about that, that's where I really wanted to dig into resilience hubs. I've been trying to work on resilience hubs since 2017, and I'm excited now that we're finally on a path where there's more folks learning about resilience hub, and there's more support for trying to build them out. I'll take us to another example about community power and community building here locally. So thinking about Beersheba Park, it's a park in Rainier Beach that has beach access. And one of the things that people would always say is, where's the beach in Rainier Beach? That park, back in 2012, Rainier Beach there was a community neighborhood plan. And in that plan, they wanted to create a better connection from the light rail to the beach. And at that time, there was a lot of overgrown blackberry. There was one whole picnic table there. So it wasn't really a great space to use for folks in the community. It's wild to think that you have beachfront access right there, but you can't even go into it. And thinking about the different parks around the city, thinking about Alakai, Golden Gardens, all these parks that have been maintained and have been created and had been invested in to be a space for folks to gather, and thinking about this place in Rainier Beach where you couldn't even access the water. And so there was a lot of community organizing to get the city to put in the investment, community organized to also create a plan to have what they wanted to see in that park. And they just had their grand opening last weekend, 2 weekends ago on April 13th. If you haven't checked it out yet, it's really great. They added a boardwalk to be able to access the waterway. There's more picnic tables, more barbecue pits, things like that, where it is more of a more of a community vision coming into real world and real practice, where folks advocated for this since 2012, and it is now coming into fruition. And it's taken a really long time, but a lot of the community folks who have been organizing for that to happen were there and are really excited to finally see something come to fruition for that project. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So that kind of segues into, how do we know that resilience hubs or environmental improvements, things like that, are what the community wants? Just like in this example, this has been part of a neighborhood plan since 2012. It's been over a decade and it's finally happened, right? And I think that's something that we hear often, no shade to Ben and the city, that, the city takes a long time to actually get to supporting and meeting the needs of folks in the community. So there's other community-based organizations, and I'll get into that again with Got Green, for example. When I was working there, part of my work to understand emergency management and how do we support folks in the community when there's some kind of disruption, I did about 40 interviews with folks in different neighborhoods around Seattle. If you don't know, right now, the city has the P patches around the city as designated emergency hubs. And I don't know about you, but I personally don't know who runs the P patches near my neighborhood. And that was what I heard from people that I interviewed. Some of the questions that I asked them was, do you know where your nearest hub is? Would you use it in an emergency? And if not, then what would you do instead? And so of the 40 people that I interviewed, one person knew that the P patches were designated emergency hubs, but they didn't know where it was. So most of the folks that I talked to didn't know where their closest emergency hub P patch location was. And when I asked them, would you go to this space in the time of an emergency? And mind you, I started these interviews at the end of 2019. And we know what happened in 2020. We saw a lot of closure with the peak of the pandemic. And so the attitude kind of changed, right? People weren't really thinking about emergency planning or disaster planning or just any kind of disruption, what happens. And then it kind of shifted when we were into March of 2020 and folks were seeing that, oh, we really aren't getting resources. It's not really clear what's happening. We're hearing different things from our federal government and from our local officials. And so people were having a little bit of a hard time trying to understand who do they trust for information, where do they go to get resources, things like that. And so in documenting that process, really heard folks from different parts or different communities in the area that there was a really big need for sustaining connection and for creating resources that are accessible to folks in places that can be trusted. We also heard that, some folks thinking about gentrification, some folks don't really know the people around them where they live. And so they are tied to cultural anchors like faith-based organizations or to an office of folks that you organize with, for example. And so really hearing that and trying to understand the different ways that we can create resilience hubs or like kind of what that means. I just want to say it's going to look different for everybody, right? We're going to be talking about one strategy, a couple different strategies, looking at the city side, and there's going to be room for everybody to join in this work because we really need to understand locally at a neighborhood level, like between the different 5-block radius, what are the needs of the folks in your area? And going back to kind of the need around the time of COVID, we saw a lot of mutual aid groups coming up and seeing how folks were coming to support each other with setting up small mini pantries, and setting up tool libraries around the neighborhood, little fridges that you can go and get food or canned goods from. Really seeing the support of folks there. And I just wanted to highlight the excitement of the energy that folks have been bringing, and really wanting to, in this next part after the break, digging into what the opportunity could be with building resilience hubs. And so with that, I'll pass it back to Tony to bring us to a break.
Thank you, Nancy. You are listening to Rainier Avenue Radio World. Earth deserves more than a day. We've been here for one day, which means we have 4 more to go. We are really excited about that. You're currently listening to Resiliency Hubs. This is presented by NHuizar Consulting. And also joining us is Ben Jung of the Seattle Office of Sustainability and Development. Look, we've got a lot ahead of us over the course of these next few days. Solid Ground is in the house, and they'll be presenting here at, I think, 12:30. Then we've also got Communities of Color, protecting communities of color. And then also, again, just more all day long, right here on Rainier Avenue Radio World. We will be right back. Charlie Darnell will be up here to ask a few questions of both of our guests right after this.
We need your help finding community members to help shape the future of your utilities and the environment. We have 2 exciting opportunities for the public to work with Seattle Public Utilities: the Customer Review Panel, CRP, and the Solid Waste Advisory Committee, SWAC. CRP and SWAC are looking for new members to contribute expertise and passion to help improve utility services and advance our commitment to environmental stewardship and social justice. Applications can be found at seattle.gov/utilities/community-advisory-recruitment. Hey, can you run that back? Applications can be found at seattle.gov/utilities/community-advisory-recruitment. Thank you. Application deadline for both opportunities is Tuesday, April 23rd.
What's going on, world? It's your boy OG Mambo
and your guy D Money. Join us along with Pint Size Patron and ID Yourself
here on Fresh Juice at Rainier Avenue Radio
every Wednesday hump day from 9 to 11 Pacific.
Get exclusive interviews from your favorite artists, all the hottest music, and updates on what we got going on in the world.
That's every Wednesday, 9 to 11 p.m. on Seattle's Rainier Avenue Radio.
Welcome to the Fitness Corner. I'm your host, Mark Bryant, and you're going to get a whole total body workout on my show, starting off with a warm-up, aerobics, strength training, cool down, and stretching every Friday from 11:30 to 12 right here on Rainier Avenue Radio. Oh, my man. You know, everybody goes through a storm sometimes.
God is, and Rainier Avenue Radio World have a new address. We're now located at 4916 Rainier Avenue South in Columbia City, 98118. God is still loving on your community, being a blessing and meeting the needs of the people. Don't miss any of our amazing shows. Your favorite community radio station. Tune in and come on down and get some free food and let us continue to love on you. Don't forget to tune in. See you soon for free food and free entertainment with God is and Rainier Avenue Radio .world.
Yo, Rainier Avenue Radio. Seattle's best music, talk, and sports station.
Welcome back to Earth Deserves More Than a Day, here hosted at the historic Columbia City Theater. We are here learning about resilience hubs. And without much of a break, I'm just going to hand it right back so these lovely people can keep going.
Thank you, Charlie. So yeah, we're just about to wrap up the formal part and get into this resilience hub work in the city strategy. So Ben, can you tell us more?
Sure, yeah. And I think I want to call out before getting into what the city's doing, really want to call out what Nancy spoke to, which was the community organizing work that Got Green has done, Puget Sound Sage have done, trying to better understand and bring to light what it is that community members want in their neighborhoods for them. Because the resilience hubs the work that the city is doing echoes what other municipalities and other cities in the country have started to do, but it really comes from what community members have asked for repeatedly. And, ask the city to fund, ask the city to think up and try to figure out how it's possible. And so want to thank Nancy and these community organizations for doing this work, for really pushing this to the forefront. Part of the Resilience Hub work is funded by the Green New Deal, which City of Seattle adopted in 2019. And the Green New Deal is, basically cementing the City of Seattle's commitment to climate justice. And one of the main tenets of it is to build healthy, resilient, and connected communities, which the Resilience Hub strategy falls under there. So like I mentioned before, the city is developing the citywide Resilience Hub plan, which is going to guide how the city can assist and support resilience hubs. And these resilience hubs are trusted community serving facilities that help residents in everyday life and also before, during, and after an emergency. And I think, we both talked about them a bit, but resilience hubs exist in everyday life now already. They probably look like a faith organization, either a mosque or a temple or a church. They might look like your neighborhood nonprofit where you go for resources. They might look like a food pantry or a food bank, daycare centers, senior centers. These are all those trusted community serving facilities that people go to every day, that we go to every day for what we need to get information, to get resources. I think the Resilience Hubs concept, what it does is really support these trusted community serving facilities by either helping them with renovations to their buildings so that they can withstand natural weather of climate change, weather events such as wildfire smoke or extreme rain or extreme cold or heat. So for example, a building that has updated windows, updated HVAC systems, air filtration systems, insulation, even solar panels can withstand all of these climate change related events. And having the additional component of emergency preparedness as well, so that neighbors know what to do, they know where to go when, say, a disruption happens, either social or environmental. So say that, a couple years ago, we had that intense heat wave. So people know where to go, they know what to do to respond to that heat wave, or even a social disruption like COVID-19. The Resilience Hub has access to communication from the city, is a trusted source of resources and information, and neighbors know that they can go to the hub in order to get that information and to also check in on the other neighbors that are around in the community as well. And so I think what we're trying to do with this plan is, we have this idea from what other cities have been doing, from what we know about resilience hubs, from the rich literature and organizing history that community groups have done in Seattle. So we have a sense of what resilience hubs could be and how the city could assist and support. But we definitely want to make sure and correct and kind of validate that and make sure that the connection between what community wants and the plan is there. And so to do that, we are doing community engagement events in the spring and summer. We have created a design cohort, an engagement cohort of 6 community-based consultants. Nancy is one of them to help us with engagement events. And so I'll hand it back over to Nancy to talk a little bit more about what they have got planned.
Yeah, so something that I'm really excited about, like I mentioned, I've been working on this since 2017. And, in that time, community organizing has also changed, right? Like we've gone through a pandemic. The way that we've done community organizing needs to change too. People are tired, right? So what I'm excited to do this summer is to host a block party in the neighborhood where we're going to talk to folks about resilience hubs and kind of frame it in a way where folks understand like what this could mean for them in my neighborhood. And in the engagement that we've done so far, folks are still really excited about accessible food and making gardens and being able to grow their own food. And so that's one component that we'll be asking folks about. What do you want to see in the community garden in this neighborhood? I'll get into the specifics. I live on right next to Chief Sealth Trail in Beacon Hill. All of the power lines, that's all Seattle City Light property, right? And if you walk along that trail, it's a little empty. There's a cement, you got some hills that you can walk on, but other than some of the community gardens that have been established, there isn't really shade or any like cute flowers that you can look at. So really trying to think about, what can we use with this space so that's more than just a place that we can walk, but also a place where folks feel comfortable gathering and connecting with other neighbors. And then we've also heard from folks that having some kind of tool library, because tools are expensive, trying to do projects and maintain your yard can be expensive, and then not having a place to store those tools has also been a challenge for folks. And also thinking about this kind of work with the block party, I don't want to invite people to come sit in a lecture hall and we're going to talk about resilience hub. That's one strategy, right? But like I mentioned, we hear folks, people are tired. They want to have fun. They want to connect with other people, want to find those opportunities where, I'm not going to a networking event or going back to my office and we're having a potluck. Like I want to be out in another space where I can just not think about work, not thinking about my crazy kids at home, things like that. So having this block party, we're going to have those kinds of conversations. We're going to have a zine workshop, and we're also just going to have food available for folks. We're going to have box fan giveaways. And there's one more thing that I don't remember what it is. One more thing. Oh, we're going to do, what is that game? Cornhole. Have games so it's also family friendly, and if people want to bring out their kids because it's a nice summer day, there's going to be opportunity for that, and to also continue to build connections with their neighbors. Last year when I first started talking about this with our neighbors, it was right around the time of the Beacon Hill like yard sale weekend. And when we did that, we did it on a Sunday. Saturday was a busier day. That's what we learned. So this year, block party is on a Saturday. But on that Sunday, we still had about 20 people come through, and they're like, oh yeah, we just live up the street and we've never heard about, the Resilience Hub. That's when we first started talking to folks about Resilience Hub. And people were really excited and donated to help support planning the block party for later this year. So that's going to happen on July 13th from 2 to 6 p.m. I'll have more information out and be putting that out. We'll send this over to Rainier Ave Radio folks. But really excited to have folks in the community and other folks join too as the city starts to develop their strategy. And the Resilience Hub work that I'm thinking about is different than a little bit different than what the city is thinking, because I'm wanting to have one like within my home. How do I support the folks in my neighborhood so that I have resources like blankets if it's getting too cold, or I can have that tool to turn off your water. I don't know what it's called, but I know I have one, and I know that there was a lot of pipe bursting this last winter, and then talking to folks about how to be winter safe, having little mini zines that show you how to be winter and summer safe with the heat and with the extreme cold weather. So yeah, like I mentioned, I'm really excited for this work to continue moving forward, and hopefully to see some folks at the block party. Like I said, we're gonna have food. It'll be a good time. We'll have a DJ. We might do karaoke. That was the other thing. Folks are excited about karaoke. And really just wanting to connect with other folks and be in community with people that are excited about this kind of work too and looking forward to it. Anyone want to add anything before we go to questions?
I think the only thing I'll add is there's going to be a karaoke machine at every Resilience Hub in the future. No, but I think Nancy's event sounds great. A block party. I feel like this getting out there, connecting with folks is in the spirit of Resilience Hubs. We're working on our other scheduled activities that'll be this spring and summer. If you would like to learn more, we have a website, which is seattle.gov/environment/resilience-hubs. That's seattle.gov/environment/resilience-hubs. And there you can sign up for more information, as well as updates on when these other events this spring and summer will be happening. But I think that's all for me right now. So if there are any questions, I guess we could open it up to the group.
Yeah, thank you both for that wonderful presentation about Resilience Hubs. We do have one question from the audience, and then I'll get up here and yap away afterwards.
Thank you both for that awesome presentation. I really appreciated just hearing so much of the rich history that has been going on, led by you and other folks in community, Nancy. So thank you for your work. And you both talked a little bit about what community members have been flagging as far as, thanks, Tony, as far as needs and wants to see in community resilience hubs. And I'm curious if you could speak a little bit more to maybe how some of these like trusted community serving facility, like leaders within those organizations, maybe what are some ways that they could also get engaged specifically with this current resilience hub planning process that's happening?
Thank you so much for that question. Yeah, we have plans to meet with interested community organizations. We've had Nancy held a community dinner and discussion recently at the UW-Othello Commons, and we're able to connect with some community groups in the neighborhood who were definitely interested. And so our hope is that we can get different groups, different folks together this spring and the summer and get really into the weeds of what it is that they believe they're doing. Well, hold on. What resiliency means to them, what work they're doing to advance resiliency, what kind of obstacles and challenges are in their way. And with a better understanding of that, see how different city programs or state and federal programs and funding could support that, could assist that, could increase capacity and help them out to become, more robust resilience hubs. So I think I would say for folks who are seeing this and who are interested to go to our website or contact us so that we can be connected, and that when those listening sessions or conversations happen this spring and summer, we'll be able to reach out.
Yeah, and I'll add from the dinner that we hosted last week, we had a representative from the Child Refugee Center, and she was telling me that, during the pandemic, they were hosting clinics and vaccine clinics. Words. Sorry, it's early. They were hosting these kinds of events that were open to the community, but they were only getting folks from within their community. And that's where they were like, this is where we want to be able to open up and have more folks come and join us in the space, but we don't know how to let folks know. Like, we saw a lot of people walking by, but they didn't come in, and we think it's because they thought that we were only serving folks within our community. And so again, I think that connection and the opportunity that folks are looking for to meet other people is there. We just need to create the avenues for folks to be able to use those and connect with each other.
Thank you for that. I've got a bunch of questions to ask. Excited to ask them. The first one pertains to what you started off the presentation, which is the idea of resilience hubs are a bridge to the community. With that being said, why do you feel like this is necessary now? Or maybe a better way to phrase it is, what do you think the barriers are between the government, the city government, and the community now that makes these resilience hubs so necessary.
I'll get into like the consulting work and why I do it in this frame. So, like I mentioned, I used to be a community organizer and worked in a nonprofit, but I really saw the disconnect between like city wanting to support this kind of work, but still having their constraints of like, we need to collect data and do it in this way, and community-based organizations not always having capacity to do things in that way. And now we're seeing opportunity where, you know, before the plan is even written, city departments like the Office of Sustainability and Environment are trying to connect with folks so that there's, before the plan is cemented into place, there's that engagement with folks. And I think on the consulting side, there's still, you know, coming out of peak of the pandemic, there's still a lot of strain on our community-based organizations to support community in the ways where, you know, they had to switch from their programming to doing direct service and now trying to figure out the balance. So as a consultant, that's where I kind of see my role to be able to be the in-between of like, how do we move the city processes and continue to advocate, but also continue to support and hold our community-based organizations so that they're not facing burnout. So I think that was a big thing that we saw during the pandemic is if we're not allowing the space for folks to rest and be able to take time to sit with within their own organizations, within their own communities, then just putting that external energy out just takes a big toll on people. And so now we have a big opportunity with this kind of framing to highlight how do we do things differently. Like I think, you know, the city has a lot of great programs too. Like as a consultant, I do the outreach for those. But a lot of times I'm still not able to get folks to sign up to some of these programs because there's still things like too much paperwork for people to fill out, things like that. But now there's space where, you know, we can hear that and continue to make the adjustments versus in the past, it was like, well, this is just kind of how it goes. And then in that process with Resilience Hubs, I'm excited for the opportunity for, with Hubs being a place where, you know, maybe there's technical assistance workshops so that people can get signed up for programs like this. Those are the kinds of resource connections that I'm looking forward to and really hoping that comes out of this kind of process to create that space for more connection between the government and the folks that they're serving so that there's more of that a clear line of connection to folks.
And then I think I'll add, you know, the kind of the impetus for me, or one of the impetuses I see is that, you know, climate change is here, we feel it, and folks are feeling it, and every day, every wildfire season, every cold snap. And so I think on the state and federal level, it's also very clear that climate change is a present issue. So there's a lot of funding on the state and federal levels to do kind of energy efficiency, to do building upgrades. And so in terms of that connection and that bridge, I think for us really wanting to make sure that the money that is out there, either from the city, the state, or the federal levels, gets to community members, gets to the frontline neighborhoods that are directly affected first and worst most by climate change, so that folks are ready and prepared for and adapt to all of the impacts that we're feeling.
Can I add more, Charlie?
Of course you can.
Just thinking about the history too of this work, like I mentioned, the environmental movement and environmental justice movement are different things. If you think about the Sierra Club and John Muir, Sierra Club's been around for a really long time, right? They're one of the organizations that have received a lot of funding through different grants from the government, things like that. And now, just as been mentioned, there's a big opportunity to bring in that kind of funding into our communities. And if we're not able to advocate for what we want, other people will be there to say what we need, right? And so that's what we don't want to have happen. We don't want to continue that history of people telling us that this is what we should want or should have in our communities. So I think, again, like, this is a big opportunity to get folks in synergy around, like, what are the actual needs that folks have, and how do we communicate and advocate for that funding so that we can see those benefits in the short-term and long-term future.
Mm-hmm. So if I'm hearing you correctly, it's placing more agency on members of the community and giving them more say in what they're creating and where they're living and what their community spaces look like. With that being said, how do you ensure that community members don't end up kind of with the burden of maintaining these spaces? And where does the city step in to make sure that they're still up and functional and ready for people to use?
I mean, that's a great question. That's one of the big question marks that we have, right? I mean, we see this a lot, buildings get built and then over time, they get old, they get sick, they get tired, and they need maintenance, right? They need repairs. They need this long-term kind of operations in order to stay healthy. And so I think that's something that we're still trying to figure out, figuring out how to fund long-term operations, long-term maintenance, how to fund staff capacity. And I would say it's not only the city, it's probably going to be, like in every other case, kind of a web of different funding. It could be the city, it could be the state, federal, it could be philanthropy or donors. So it's going to look like a mix of different sources, most likely, because that's typically what we've seen before in the past. But yeah, that's definitely top of mind because we want to make sure, like Nancy said, organizations and folks are tired. People have been doing this work for a really long time. And so we want to make sure that this isn't an additional burden, right? That this stays something that is within a group and a neighborhood and folks' capacity, and that it remains an additive thing, that it isn't, kind of creating more strain or more pressure.
I really love this question. Thank you, Charlie. One of the things that I'm excited because when I got into organizing, we were talking about young leaders for the green economy. And when I graduated college, I was doing internships and I graduated with a decent GPA. But when I graduated, the only thing I got hired for was an AmeriCorps program. If you've heard about AmeriCorps, I think I was making like a $300 stipend every month for 10 months. And that's not sustainable, right? Like, if you're going to ask a student to, like, okay, I want you to go to college and you're going to go get this degree that's going to give you $100,000 of debt and you can only take an AmeriCorps position after, good luck. Why would I ever want to do that? There's no way, right? The movement cannot sustain in that way if we're telling our folks, you have to volunteer, you have to put in all of these hours and give your whole heart into this work. That's not fun for me. I don't want to do that. So in thinking about, there's job opportunities with this work. We just have to figure out how are we creating those opportunities. And going back to what I mentioned earlier, that's part of why I became a consultant. We've been taught that, if you want to make good change, nonprofit is the only way to do it. But we're not taught, like, you can be an entrepreneur and start a business. Like, if the city needs help maintaining these storm drains or cutting the grass, they put out contracts for things like that. So there's opportunity for our folks to be part of the green economy, be part of also sustaining their neighborhoods and seeing these things maintained by people that look like them, that are around them, that they know and trust, and can see how that work we put in can really benefit all of us. And just thinking about that, in my mind, I don't want to do this kind of work in 10 years. Because what I've noticed is a lot of times, if you do it for too long, you're like, I'm the only one that can do it right. I don't want to do that, right? So I'm really excited in this kind of resilience hub work and environmental justice work in general to also bring along our young folks or folks who are looking to change careers. Like, what are the different opportunities that we don't often talk about? I went to school to be a scientist because I thought that's what you did to work in the natural systems. But I'm learning now it doesn't need to all be that. And there's so much opportunity. We just have to understand more about it and be able to talk and tell our stories. So that's also part of why I'm really grateful to be on the show today and yesterday to be able to talk about these things, just because the more people know, the more opportunity there is to grow and to create the culture for Seattle community. You know, growing up here, people are always like, oh, Seattle's boring. I don't want to go there. I don't want to move there. It's full of transplants. Like, but again, thinking about me and the people that I grew up with, there's a big opportunity here to really think about, you know, what we want the city to look like and to have a stake in how we want our communities to be.
Thank you for that. And I kind of want to touch on this point of career opportunities just a little bit, because as we all know, the job market is horrible right now, at least it seems. And I think that'd be interesting for everyone listening online. Maybe someone is looking for a job. How does this Resilience Hub breed these career opportunities? I was wondering if you could delve into that a little bit more.
Did you say breed these career opportunities?
Yeah. Can people find positions within the Resilience Hub system to work?
I think right now, at least in my sphere of knowledge, it's unclear yet what those jobs are, but there are some opportunities being created with, like with little labs, for example. They're branching out from a mutual aid group where they're creating it's like free little libraries, but their focus is on art and science. And putting in things like they were telling me about this last week, where they will grow yeast and grow yeast in shade, and then it grows differently, and then they use that to stamp different things to create art. So it's part of that, and also creating like place to store food and things like that. But part of that work, you know, people are applying for grants to, one, build those little hubs in different communities. Also hiring facilitators or folks that can run like an art workshop with people. So there's small things like that where, you know, if you're looking for a little job here to kind of just explore and see like what could be different about the work that I do in community, there's opportunities like that. As far as career change, I'm not sure. I think that we're in the process of that. Like thinking about King County, they just had I think a couple years ago, they have a green job initiative where they want to create more green jobs in the county and hire folks from the community to be able to fill those jobs. And thinking about I mentioned you're going to have to keep the storm drains clear. The city has a program where they do, I can't remember what the exact words are. It's not wastewater, but it's like stormwater management. And there's, internships where they'll show you, what are apprenticeships? That's the word. There's apprenticeships where you'll go through the program, and then if there's opportunities within the city, then you can get hired for those kinds of jobs. But that's what comes to mind right now.
Yeah, I think, you know, I will echo what Nancy mentioned in terms of like the careers that would be available at the Resilience Hubs is probably to be determined. And so not sure yet, because if these hubs are these community organizations, you know, directly at the hubs, it might be jobs with that organization. That being said, I feel like the Resilience Hub itself would be a place of information and a place of resources, and perhaps a place where you could go to learn more about jobs that are available. You know, there's, you know, the just transition. So one of the Green New Deal tenets is, you know, transitioning to a clean, green economy in terms of off of fossil fuels. And with that, there's tons of job opportunities, like Nancy mentioned, in terms of green jobs. And so I think there's a lot out there that the Resilience Hub may play more of a role in terms of getting information out and letting folks know that this is a place where you could go to connect, possibly. I feel like there's a lot of interesting opportunity in that part.
And just for audience clarification, these are not new spaces being built, but spaces that are designated as Resilience Hubs because they already do somewhat of the work to provide for the community. Why do you think it's so critical to turn spaces that the community already trusts into Resilience Hubs and not just build a ton of new buildings in like Beacon Hill?
I mean, that's a great question. What I do want to say, yes, this is right now, Resilience Hubs are looking at existing buildings, so it's not going to be any new construction of buildings. And I think part of that is because new construction is very expensive. The cost of land is really expensive. And so in terms of investment, we want to focus on existing buildings because there is money available and funding available to rehab those buildings, and organizations might already be in those buildings. So those are trusted community serving facilities. I think I want to say, for just to clarify that this right now isn't a Resilience Hub program. So it isn't as if a building or a organization would be stamped as a Resilience Hub by the city, and that's a program and there's funding attached to that. So that doesn't exist at the moment. But I think it's important for us to invest in existing organizations because they are trusted, they are community serving. We want to make sure that we're meeting communities where they are and not forcing them to go somewhere else in order to access resources. And so, like Nancy mentioned, there's a lot of organizing, or like we both mentioned, there's a lot of organizing that's happened. There's a lot of trusted spaces that already exist. And so I think Resilience Hubs, the model and the concept, is really trying to build on that, leverage those spaces, and make those richer, deeper, and broader serving to and evolving to what community needs might be.
Yeah. Right before we go to commercial, I want to ask kind of a softball question, just to wrap things up. I would say, what are you most excited to see materialized in Resilience Hubs?
I think for me, I'm most excited about seeing people do things together. I know that sounds very basic, but I hear so much about how disconnected folks feel, and people that I know that live in apartment buildings and have community spaces or amenity spaces, they don't utilize them with their neighbors. So just really looking forward to more neighborhood interactions and more understanding of like, how do we talk together as people and really just connect with each other and have more fun.
I agree with Nancy. I think getting to know your neighbors is really powerful. It sometimes feels hard to do, and I'm hoping that, perhaps the Resilience Hubs could be a place where this is encouraged. And, from the city side, really supporting that as well in whatever ways we can.
Thank you both. Thank you both for this wonderful presentation. I encourage everybody to at least Google Resilience Hubs after this. This will all be saved on demand on YouTube. You can rewatch it. We're going to go to a commercial break. This is Earth Deserves More Than a Day. When we come back, we're going to be, me and Tony are going to be doing a brief rundown, and then we have Rent Smart presentation, and we have a presentation on uplifting communities of color, and then we have the Circular Economy Business Park presentation. So thank you again, and we'll be right back.
I'm Paul Pearson, host of Star Time, and this is my real voice. Honest, you're hearing it on Rainier Avenue Radio .world.
Should have told her you were sorry. Support for Rainier Avenue Radio comes from Cascade PBS, presenting season 2 of Out and Back with Allison Mariella Desir. Join Allison as she explores the Pacific Northwest with changemakers who are reclaiming space in the outdoors and creating opportunities for local BIPOC communities to engage with nature and find joy and healing. It's available now on Cascade PBS app and airing on KCTS 9 Thursdays at 8:50 p.m.
Hello, listener. What's important to you about what's going on in your community? Are you interested? Are you concerned? In any case, I invite you to tune into my show, Seattle Here and Now, on Rainier Avenue Radio .world. Why? I will be covering a wide range of topics important to you and impacting the community. Each show will have a special guest or guests to share with you information on a variety of subjects that are happening here and now in Seattle. I promise I will work hard to make my show informative, interesting, and entertaining. Be sure to listen to Seattle Here and Now on Rainier Avenue Radio .world.
Rainier Avenue Radio presents All Music, All Day Saturday. Music, all day Saturday.
This is Edward Bailey, Bulldog Blue.
Jazz from the capital.
That's right. It's time once again for Jazz from the Cabinets.
Start time. Thanks for tuning in. My name is Paul. It's Start Time. Saturdays, all music, all day. Reggae out. K-Fox night. Looking for the perfect beat? Yeah, it's the beat of the box. Fresh juice. D-Money and myself, D-Money. Taylor Hart. Spencia. The Northwest Rap Gang. DJ Medina. Jackson. Northwest Rap Gang. Sergio Lacour's Love Line. It's Sergio's Love Lines with Sergio Lacour. Go to the phone line. Tell him who we talking. Sea Monster Radio. Mojang. It's your day.
Mojang Mondays. This is KZ Music Media. Caller Goddess. Caller Goddess for Mojang Mondays.
Just like God is inspiration all day and all night. Saturday. Rainier Avenue Radio.
Do you have an idea for a community project in your neighborhood? You could be eligible for up to $50,000 in funding through the City of Seattle's Neighborhood Matching Fund. Grants are awarded to grassroots projects that build stronger communities, with an emphasis on projects led by impacting Black, Indigenous, and people of color BIPOC communities. To learn more about the Neighborhood Matching Fund or to see if your project meets the criteria, visit seattle.gov/neighborhoods/NMF.
You know you can't get enough of Rainier Avenue Radio. .world.
Wait. Oh, thank you. Nancy, could you grab my personal phone and make sure I don't have somebody at the door, because I'm expecting somebody to ring the doorbells at some point. I forgot about that. And if they do, yeah. If somebody does ring, I need to say I'll be there like 10 minutes.
All right, welcome back to Rainier Avenue Radio .world. It's me, Tony B. Charlie and I are going to give you an update about some things that are going on later on in the week. What happened yesterday? Just general information about environmental justice. But we have a very special guest here with us. And so, I said, hey, let's make sure that we get some airtime for this individual. Jimena, how are you? Oh, grab the microphone.
Doing well.
Thanks, Charlie. Well, awesome. Well, first, let's do this. Let's tell the folks a little bit about the work that you do in environmental justice.
Yeah, happy to. Hi, everyone. Good morning. My name is Jimena Fonseca Morales, and I use she, her pronouns. I am one of the strategic advisors working at the City of Seattle's Office of Sustainability and Environment, specifically supporting two of our grant programs. One of them is the Environmental Justice Fund, and the other one is the Duwamish River Opportunity Fund. These are two grant programs that are really intended to support community-driven solutions that advance environmental justice, address the impacts of climate change, and are also trying to improve the quality of life for community members who have been bearing disproportionate impacts of different injustices. So a little bit about me, but glad to answer any specific questions that you have.
Okay. And Charlie, you can jump in here too when you need to, when you feel like answering some questions. So by the way, thank you. We were a recipient, an awardee of one of the grants. And that's what I want to talk about. When you are activating folks who have the passion and the advocacy and the community that they are trying to reach. Let's talk about some of the challenges of making sure that these folks get the support that they need when they're trying to address some of the issues that we're talking about.
Yeah, I would say that environmental justice is probably something that a lot of our community-based organizations are already engaged in, and perhaps they're not thinking about it within those terms of like, oh, this is environmental justice. But I think that it's really critical to think about the ways that they are, really showing up for community, really thinking about day-to-day impacts of like air quality. Previous panelists Nancy and Ben were talking about how communities are experiencing poor air quality due to wildfire smoke, or perhaps it's their proximity to traffic or heavy traffic from roadways, but even things like experiencing extreme heat differently. And so a lot of these organizations are serving community members and providing resources to them. And that is environmental justice, right? It's I think about environmental justice as being at the intersection of social justice, economic justice, racial justice, and we're trying to lead with that. And so the Environmental Justice Fund was created back in 2017, really, by a group of incredible community leaders who had come together in the years prior to engage community and really start to surface priorities for them, or priorities that they wanted to see happen in their community around access to healthy air, to clean water, to green spaces, to jobs. And this other big component was, we know that there's funding out there for this sort of work, but it's not reaching us, right? It's not reaching community-led organizations that are predominantly led by people of color or communities of color. And so that's why the city at the time started investing in this program. And I would encourage folks to reach out to us, to reach out to me, to reach out to, or check out our website. It's also seattle.gov/environment/EJ Fund, to just learn more about the types of programs that we have funded, because we know that the impacts of climate change and environmental hazards are felt disproportionately, and every solution looks different for every community, which means that our projects that we fund are also different. And it could be that you see something on there and it sounds very similar to work that you're already doing. So I would encourage you to check out past projects and consider applying.
Charlie, did you have a?
So I just want to touch on a point that you just mentioned, which is that the funding is there. It's just not reaching the people that it should. One, why do you think it's not reaching people now? And two, how are you changing that materially?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think historically, a lot of community-led work just hasn't been receiving the same amount of prioritization, if you will, from larger funding institutions. And part of that, I would say that it's the fact that a lot of our community-based organizations and community groups who are doing the work on the ground aren't really resourced well to be able to even provide or submit competitive proposals to these sorts of like funding opportunities that exist, right? And in addition to that, there's a lot of barriers and hoops to jump through to access funding. And even if you get the funding, sometimes what happens is that there is additional hoops for how you report or how you access the funding. And so it can be really taxing and resource intensive for organizations. And sometimes it's just honestly too difficult and not worth it, right? And so in addition to the fact that there are just organizations who have done really well in accessing funding, and so they continue to receive funding, but it means that there maybe isn't as easy of an entry point for other community-based or community-based organizations or community groups. And so what we're doing at the Environmental Justice Fund is really leaning into the knowledge of our community partners who are part of the Environmental Justice Committee. These are leaders from community-based organizations and communities who have really close ties to folks who are BIPOC, Indigenous, people of color, immigrants, refugees, and people who really understand what environmental justice looks like on the ground and what it means to be part of a community group trying to access funding, right? And so they are our partners really closely in trying to devise ways to continue to remove barriers to like the application process, to how we access funding, and to how we report. And I think that it's really critical for us to also continue to evaluate the work we're doing and make changes in an iterative way.
I'm gonna throw race into this Kool-Aid a little bit. The research that I've done shows that there's social injustice in the environmental protection. Beyond the occupations generated directly by private sector environmental organizations, the majority of jobs created by environmental protection in trade, manufacturing, and service industries are being filled with white folks. You can disagree with that if you choose to. Again, that's the research. Why is that happening? Is that just part of the systemic system that we've been engaged and involved in for over 100 years? Or do you disagree with what I said?
I don't disagree. I think we know, and like data tells us that people of color are underrepresented in these spaces, right? And I think part of it is that, yes, we haven't had access to the same opportunities to be able to prepare ourselves for these sorts of careers, which in turn means that we don't see people like us in these spaces. And then it's hard to actually think about how do we navigate, I don't know, like apprenticeship programs or internships. How do we get in our feet in the door to try to have these experiences that then allow us to have more doors open to us, right? And so I think it is something that we are actively thinking about as part of like the Green New Deal body of work that we're doing, and even work before that. Folks have been really advocating for green jobs that are creating pathways that will lead to careers where folks can thrive. And those jobs we're really thinking about being for primarily our communities of color and communities who have not been represented.
Well, I know it was more comfortable for me when I was applying for the Environmental Justice Fund to see someone, who I thought would understand where I was coming from. I know you got to go. Charlie, do you have an additional question you want to ask, or?
Just one based on what you were speaking about, in the sense that this kind of works in an opposite way, where you're listening to community first and then basing your actions on that instead of telling a community what it should do. If you had to generalize that, if that became the model for how we interacted with the community and how we gave out grants, what do you think would change?
I love that question. I think so much about the way that we run our programs would be really different. I think it would allow us to really foster trust and like true partnership with community-based organizations that we want to reach. I think for us, we really like to think about ourselves as partners and not just a funder or a check, right? So we really think about ways that we connect our partners to different opportunities that they might be interested in, whether that's informing a new program that's being developed or new policy that's being created, or making connections for them to other community-based organizations whose work also touches on the work that they're trying to lead. And so I think I encourage as much as possible folks to really be thinking about their past experiences as like funding recipients and providing feedback to the folks who are in charge of those funding programs. Because from my experience, I think we all really want to be able to show up for community-based organizations and groups in ways that are really beneficial for both of us, right? That are reciprocal. And so I think we're open to that feedback and open to changing the ways that we run our programs.
Thank you, Him. And I'd like to give you an opportunity to say any final words that you'd like to say to our audience. Again, thank you for joining us and sharing this incredible information. So if you're looking and you've been checking out Earth Deserves More Than a Day, you have seen a variety of folks sharing their information, which is really one of the major things that we want to accomplish here, to make sure that we reach out to all people. But whatever you'd like to say to our audience right now before you take off, thank you so much for this impromptu interview and taking the time to join us and share with us. But yes, this is the contact person that I was so happy to say, wait a minute, this is awesome. I feel like I can now try to share what I'm trying to do in regards to environmental justice without the background and the knowledge and the information that maybe a lot of larger organizations have, but still had the passion and the devotion to try to make sure that our community was represented. And thank you for that, for being able to listen. And I know a couple times you might have been, oh my gosh, this guy.
Not at all, Tony. I'd like to think that one of the reasons why I even got into like public sector was because I wanted to really think about the ways that I could serve as some sort of bridge to community partners, to community leaders, folks who look like me, folks that I feel connected to because of my own background as a Latina, as an immigrant. And so I will just say thank you to you both for organizing this event, for creating a platform for incredible leaders like Nancy, like in camera yesterday, Ashley Shoecraft. All the folks that you've had thus far have been really incredible, and I'm really excited for folks to be able to just
We got some bangers.
Yeah, and more to come. It's only day 2. So thank you both. Glad to be part of this impromptu conversation, and just encourage folks to learn more about the EJ Fund, the Environmental Justice Fund, and think about the ways that you can take advantage of this resource to support the own work that you're leading in your communities.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right.
Thank you, Hamina. Charlie, this is day 2.
Day 2. We're here.
Yeah, we were going to give an update yesterday, and we didn't get to it, and we're here to kind of do that today. And but yesterday, Charlie, was amazing. I think yesterday was amazing.
Mm-hmm. With a great start too. I thought the kickoff ran a little bit long. But
Ran a little bit long.
It was worth it.
Yeah,
It's definitely worth it.
and because we had questions from the audience.
We did.
And well, we're not going to not have the audience participate if the audience wants to participate.
Some hard hitting ones too.
Oh yeah.
What I thought was so wonderful about the way that they answered those questions was to sit up here and explain the work that you're doing, and to find such passion and importance in it. For someone to challenge you like that, I would understand a reasonable response would be, did you just listen to anything I just said? But the fact that they understood that they needed to hold that accountability to the public, I thought was so important, and a great way to kick off the events.
Air quality, water quality, we heard those things yesterday. Part of what we're looking to do is connect these issues to everyone in a way that's you feel like this impacts me. And I think it was Jimena who mentioned earlier that sometimes folks aren't aware that these things that are happening are environmental justice issues. I talked yesterday a little bit about some of what folks may recognize as larger issues, which is climate change, which is a big deal. The polar ice caps melting, which causes an array of problems just in themselves. But to hear our panelists yesterday and the perspectives that they had, from the Black Farmers Collective to the YMCA and the youth perspective, man, I think we just go back and listen. If you haven't listened to those,
Amen.
Go back and listen, Charlie.
Yeah, I think that was so important given the kind of concept we had for this event, which was to widen the scope of environmental justice. I think it's difficult if you're living day to day, and like you mentioned yesterday a few times, if you have kids and you work, it's hard to care about ice caps in Greenland melting. But when that connects to what your everyday life is like, if that connects to your mother having asthma, if that connects to the only food available to you is a McDonald's down the street, it becomes much more real. And I think it's been so important for the people that we've had to share that information, because a lot of the people that are watching, I would assume, are not PhD candidates in ecology. I think they're people that live day to day and are trying to find a way for environmental justice to connect to their lives. And I think it does.
One of the things that I thought was exceptional yesterday was the message from King County Council member Dow Constantine. And if we can get that up, do you think we can get that up, or we can play the Dow Constantine piece from yesterday? And I bet we can, Dan. I bet we can. And Charlie, we'll just kill some time until we get
Sure.
that set up.
Yeah, wonderful message. It looks incredibly professional. Dow looks great in the video.
Yeah,
I love his suit.
And you know, our efforts. King County Parks is our sponsor, and what we found is that the efforts that we have were aligned with the efforts that King County had in creating awareness to environmental justice issues.
I think aligned also in the sense of the levy, and also in the sense of trying to, what Jimena spoke about, what the Resilience Hub presentation was about, which is we want to listen to communities first and then act. And I think that's similar to the theme of what King County Parks is doing. I think that's similar to the theme of most of our presentations, and especially what we're trying to do here at the historic Columbia City Theater.
Coming up next, we've got Solid Ground with the Rent Smart presentation discussing tenant rights and responsibilities. Yeah, there's a look, and we've got a couple more on there as well, from 2 to 3 communities of conscience, efforts to protect communities of color, and then the circular economy business park. Now that sounds kind of wonky, Charlie, and what does this have to do with environmental justice? Can you give us a little background information on the circular economy business park?
Yeah, so the Circular Economy Business Park is a concept, an idea that has I think $14 million in funding right now. It basically, so if I give the example of a chair, so if a chair is broken, you're ready to throw the chair away, instead of that chair going into a waste stream, it can go to the Circular Economy Business Park and be turned into a commodity. It can go back into a commodity stream. So they'll take that lumber, they'll deconstruct it, they'll make it into just things that you can use, pieces of wood. It'll go into a reuse facility where if you want to build a chair, you can go and buy that lumber. You can buy reused lumber. So we're not constantly cutting down trees. You're not going out and buying new wood for something that you're building. You're reusing perfectly good wood to build another chair. And it can go on for as long as that wood will hold. So you could build 3-4 chairs with it maybe, but it prevents accessible and necessary resources from just flowing directly into our waste stream, which seems to be the trend in America for as long as it's been around.
Did I see that Dow piece? Are we going to be able to get that Dow piece up?
Possibly.
We'll see.
We'll see.
Tomorrow.
Yes.
Got a lot of stuff planned for you tomorrow as well. I know that we have the Women of Wisdom from Tri-Cities who will be kicking off and talking about some of Eastern Washington's resources that are available, environmental-based solutions. Shanae Fitzgerald, who is the founder and CEO of Women of Wisdom, will be here to join us. And that's at 11 to noon. Then from noon to 1, the Urban League of Metropolitan Seattle presentation, Building Community Resilience by Uplifting Environmental Justice. Nick Jeffries of the Urban League will be here along with Camille Japaya. And we were at their Black Earth Day event on Saturday.
Just a quick shout out, a little self-promotion. You can watch the live stream of that event on Rainier Avenue Radio, the YouTube channel. It was a wonderful event. Great food. Did some great interviews. Yeah, a lot of vendors. I learned about ranked choice voting for about 45 minutes. So yeah, a lot of people with a lot of very important information there.
Now, you talked about the levy, and the Transit Riders Union will be discussing the transportation levy tomorrow as well.
Yeah, the Transportation Writers Union are working on sort of an advised levy, a revised levy, I should say, to fully meet the needs of the community. Some examples of this are just making our sidewalks better. If you're in a wheelchair, there's a lot of places in Seattle where you just can't access because there's bumps, there's cracks, there's uneven sidewalks. So I'm really excited to have them. I think transportation justice is one of those aspects of widening the scope of environmental justice that does not get spoken about enough. So very blessed, very happy to have the Transit Riders Union joining us tomorrow.
And communities and clean water. The panelists, this is a King County panel. Panelists are Mary Rayburn, communications at King County Stormwater Services, Parker Linus, the Next Gen intern, and William Herbert, who's a Stormwater Services human resource analyst. Communities and clean water, and that's a big deal, Charlie. We here in the Northwest, we do have fairly clean water because of where we're located, but we've got a filtration system, and then there are some conversations about what goes into the water to purify it, I guess, and then what you have to do to take those chemicals out before it gets to us. So it's kind of a complex situation in order to get the clean water that we do get, but it has to go through some transitions to get there. So I'm sure we'll hear more about that from communities and clean water as well.
Yeah, that'll be another parks panel. So a lot of very highly educated, highly motivated individuals speaking on it. I think it's also important to remember that even if we have clean water here, that doesn't exist everywhere in the United States, which I think falls under this idea of widening the scope of environmental justice and what Jimena was talking about in tying environmental justice to issues of race and issues of financial stability and all the rest. I think that'll cover a lot, which I'm excited for.
Earth deserves more than a day. And we're doing it here at Rainier Avenue Radio. 5 days of panel discussions, lectures, films. We've got some surprises coming up for you too a little later on this week. But the whole point of this is, again, just to engage with you, to create awareness, and we want to hear your voice as well. So feel free to come on down here to the Columbia City Theater at 4916 Rainier Avenue South. It's absolutely free, free dollars, and you can participate. You can ask questions. You can network with some of the folks who are here sharing information. Or for those of you who are watching live, yes, we will continue to broadcast for the next 4 days. These panel discussions coming at you. Charlie, this is just really exciting. We've got 3.5 days left, a little over 3.5 days left. How you feeling?
Great. It feels like you're inside of an encyclopedia of ecology and environmental justice knowledge. So I would want to stress that point. If you're interested in getting involved in this work, we had a high schooler yesterday who came, and I thought that was a really important opportunity for her. It's people doing the work that she wants to do when she's older, and you can see them on stage, and you can see how knowledgeable they are about it. So if you're interested in getting involved in this work, I would encourage you to come on down. If you can't come on down, I would encourage you to look up some of the panelists that we have and talk to them. They love talking about it, and you can feel that in the theater.
We'll be here around-ish 10:30 tomorrow.
We'll hope to start at 10:30 tomorrow. We'll pray.
And we'll give you more information on what took place during the following this update right here. Charlie, anything else you want to share?
No, let's keep it going. I'm excited.
Right. We're going to keep it going. We're going to take you back to our originally scheduled programming. We'll be back at 12:30.
12:30.
Yep. And solid ground. Matter of fact, they're out front right now.
They are.
Talking to folks. We'll be back, but we're going to turn you over to our regularly